What is up, MFers, and welcome out to my favorite month to go out bass fishing. That is June. In today's video, I'm going to be telling you exactly where you need to go fish and the exact baits that I love to fish in my favorite month of the year, and that is the month of June, to help you go out and catch more fish, whether that be just to go out and have some more fun, win a tournament, or catch the biggest bass in your lake. I'm going to cover all of it in this video right now, so let's dive into it. Okay, like I said, June's my favorite month of all time to go out and bass fish, and it's probably a lot due because of what is going on right now and where I'm at. I'm actually back in Nebraska right now, and June for me always brought this feeling of, okay, we had the winter months, you know, just absolutely miserable, brutal in the Midwest. We get into the spring, very up and down, no consistency in the weather, super windy, super calm, warm fronts, cold fronts. The fish are all over the place, and in the spring up here in the Midwest, the fish seem to spawn in like 13 seconds overnight on May 13th, and then you never even saw them spawn. And then comes now in June, where the fish start doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that is they are starting to move out offshore. And it doesn't matter whether you're in South Texas or even if you're up in the upper Midwest into the Northeast, the West Coast, the fish are going to be offshore in the month of June, and that is where I like to begin my search, and in my search and be in the middle and whatever other time. That's about the only place I search. Now, before we completely jump into what I'm about to show you, I got to tell you about an exciting bait from 6 Sense that just came out. We're going to talk about this in a second, but it's called the Magbusa Shaky Worm. I was told by Casey that out of a conversation I had with him, this is a bait that I was part of kind of bringing to the forefront and really came up with, and it's a big rib shaky worm that is absolutely going to get chewed by bass around the country. It already has, already will. It's going to be a big part of my arsenal with the ones I have here in stock, but I want to give some of these baits to you guys as well. So go ahead, hit the subscribe button right now. If you become a subscriber and you comment down below, drop a comment on whatever video you want to see moving forward, and then share this video right now. The next video, check the description. I'm going to place the winner and send $100 worth of these Magbusa shaky worms so you guys can go out and blast some on it yourselves. We'll get to baits in just a second, but to me, every single month I do one of these recap videos or really tell you about where to fish, how to fish. The most important thing, of course, is going to be finding the fish, and that can mean a lot of different things based on what part of country you're in. But again, like I said, offshore is going to be the key for me. It's something that I've always excelled in, something that I've always, you know, sought out. Once I finally got to the point where I was fishing tournaments consistently, I started to realize that a lot of guys were winning tournaments offshore using baits and using methods that I flat out didn't have the access to the fish when I was just beating the bank all freaking year. I want to talk you through my rotation and really give you guys some ideas of what exactly to look for to plan your day around these situations. I always tell you guys about bait fish and what the bait fish are doing. If you can become in tune with the bait fish, then you can become in tune with what the bass are going to be doing that time of year. June is a great example of that. Exhibit number one we're going to talk about that's so important to find this time of year in June is bluegill beds. So, of course, they're going to play all summer long, even into the fall, especially down south. They're in most fisheries across the country, or at least a large percentage of them. Bluegill will actually spawn like 6 or 7 or 8 times throughout the summer. This is something I didn't know for a while until I really got going tournament fishing, but they will actually spawn, I mean, multiple times in the same locations. I don't know if they always come back to the same beds or what they do, but almost always it's around that full moon period. So the full moon, I haven't really checked on it. It's got to be here in the next couple weeks throughout the country. But the full moon is a period when the bluegill will get up on those beds and spawn, and that is absolutely huge during the month of June, because a lot of times, especially in like the Midwest, the upper Midwest, and even down in some of the lakes in Texas that are a little bit behind, this will be the first bluegill spawn that the bass really get on, where they're completely done with their spawn cycle and they start really thinking about them, and it's one of the best patterns you can fish no matter where you are. We won so many tournaments in the Midwest. They've played, you know, a ton in Elite Series and Opens tournaments, but bluegills are a major forage for bass, especially for the biggest bass in your body of water. And the above average bass, they're going to help you guys catch bigger fish than the people around you. So the places that you need to look for bluegill beds can vary a little bit, but they almost always like to spawn in areas with hard bottom on a little bit of a high spot, and generally that's going to be in the 4 to 8 foot range. There is, of course, going to be spots where there's bluegill beds up shallow in 1.5 to 4 feet of water. I don't know what it is about some fisheries, but they like to do that. But that 4 to 8 foot range, hard clay bottom, if you see a flat point come out, it's a good idea to get on your side imaging. And on side imaging, they're very, very distinct features that it's only one thing every single time, and that's those little craters in little clusters of, you know, 8 to 20 to 30, 40 of these craters that are really close together. You're gonna see those on side imaging. It's not always a dead giveaway when you see it on side imaging with if there's bass there or bluegill there or not. But a lot of times you'll see bluegill on the beds and you won't always see bass around them. But one thing I like to do is I like to fish those ones where you see the bluegill around, especially if there's deep water access nearby. The bass can slide up there and start feeding. Even if you don't see them on side scan, a lot of times the bass are hard to see from where they're ambushing from. A lot of highland reservoirs, a lot of times they will actually get back in the back of some of these cuts. So if you have a blown down dogwood tree, or a tree that kind of comes out a little bit deeper into the water than just what's, you know, your overhanging trees on the sides, you know, there's a channel that runs through it and it's a cut. A lot of times there's a dogwood in the back. It gets silted in because the roots coming up or whatever. The bluegill will spawn right there on that dogwood tree, and it is an absolutely killer place to catch giant bass that sit in those trees and the overhanging trees. They wait and they ambush, or the wolf pack down the bank and find their way to those bluegill beds that are up there in those crevices. Both situations very, very vital in the month of June, and something that I really like to look for. Now, to take it a step further, if you can find bluegill beds on those points and then you have a piece of cover, a good piece of cover nearby, those are absolutely juice spots. And the piece of cover, you know, ideally I'd love if there was a big isolated brush pile, you know, not a giant one, but one that's, you know, 10 foot wide and has some nice crevices in it and a nice natural trunk. Not a Christmas tree so much, but a little more space between the branches right next to those bluegill beds. Man, that's just like, that's juice, man. That's as good as it's gonna get. But a lot of times when the high spot comes up, if you're in a lake that has a lot of grass, a lot of times the grass edge or even some tapered off grass is gonna come right to that area where the bluegill beds are. Fishing the grass however you usually fish the grass during the summertime is going to be especially effective in that small little strike zone and that little hot spot. It's just going to be, you know, a lot of great things happening all at once. Those bass are going to chow down. You know, threadfin shad generally are going to spawn, not generally, they almost always spawn low light periods, and then that bite's done after an hour or so after the sun hits the water. Bluegill can spawn, and the activity level around those bluegill beds with the bass can be really, really inconsistent and really happen throughout the day. So that's another tip I can give you guys, is come back to those bluegill beds different times during the day. A lot of times you can fish one 2 or 3 times and it'll be nothing. All of a sudden you come back and you can catch a freaking, you know, a big bag of bass on one single bluegill bed. Same goes for those bluegill beds that are up around those shallow dogwood trees or overhanging trees that have kind of cut off those deeper, you know, cuts. The fish like to hide in the shade lines. So a lot of times first thing in the morning they'll be up cruising around in those bluegill eating them, but then fishing the cover adjacent that makes the shade lines can be absolutely key when they're on that bluegill pattern. Now, as with all my June baits, I'm keeping it very, very simple. I don't throw a lot of different stuff around these bluegill beds, but a couple of my absolute favorites, probably the first one I'm going with is right here, the hog wall. I got a whole bag of them. It's very, very simple. I almost always go with a natural color like a green pumpkin. This is one of my favorite colors. I think it's called chartreuse sungill, but this is just flat out your typical lizard bait. I think this one's the best lizard type bait on the market, to be honest. You guys have seen why. I won the damn open majority of that was on this bait. Has the 2 flappers on the sides, 2 pairs of flappers and the long tails. Just a ton of flap, and I think those flappers on the sides and this more oval style body of the hog walla makes that bait plain, and it works really, really well on a Carolina rig. So I'll be dragging that Carolina rig around with that hog walla. It doesn't matter if I'm in 2 feet of water or 10 feet of water on these bluegill bed type places. And I'll just be, you know, longer 3/4 ounce weight, a bead, a clacker, longer 4 or 5 foot leader, and just dragging it. And the good thing about the bluegill beds is you can kind of work them a little bit quicker generally than you fish that Carolina rig other times of the year. And you'll constantly be feeling the pecks of the bluegill. That's a good giveaway too if you're not sure. If you don't have forward facing sonar, even if you don't have side imaging, if you're feeling the pecks, you're pulling across hard bottom with that weight, you'll feel the transmission of all that hard bottom on that 3/4 ounce tungsten weight. You'll feel the pecks from the bluegill. A lot of times you feel peck, 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 dong, and one will just freaking have it and swimming off with it. But that'll give you a good giveaway if it's a live bluegill bed or not. A lot of times the bluegills won't be there, whether that be the wrong time of the month or they'll just not there on that bed anymore. It's good to know with that hog walla, it's got those little curly tails in the back. You're constantly going to be getting bit by bluegill if they're in the area. And that's not a bad thing. They can bite it, and then a lot of times after that, that's when it gets the old bass attention. Another bait that I use, you know, pretty much in conjunction with that Carolina rig and that hog wallet at all times, is this box, this entire box right here. It says big worm. I like to throw big worms that time of year, and that might be this Magbusa shaky worm. I'll throw this thing just straight up on a Texas rig, on a shaky head, on a free rig's probably my favorite way to throw this thing right now, just dragging it in those areas. Or I will also sling this guy right here. Now this one's special. If you guys have a lot of pressure on your lake and they've seen a lot of baits, this worm is absolutely killer, the ridge worm. People still are not on this thing. It wins so many tournaments in Texas. Get some plum bug colored ridge worms. By the way, plum's my favorite color, blue fleck if you got more color in the water, but anything that's, you know, 2 foot visibility or 1 foot visibility all the way up to as clean as it gets, plum bug's a very, very good color. But this is a special bait because this tail is different than what they're seeing. It's that spade type tail. No action to it as far as a C-tail or U-tail, but so much flow. Again, Carolina rig, Texas rig, free rig, doesn't matter. Just gets bit in places where they've seen a lot of baits, and who doesn't want a bait they haven't seen before down there? Another very good bait around those bluegill beds. If you need to cover water, you need to move the bait a little bit quicker, you need to get them to react. Of course, it's gonna be a deep crankbait. You know, C10, C15, 300 DD, 500 DD, 400 DD. We got all these deep crankbaits. You can't go wrong with any of them. And to be honest, I haven't really found a difference with bait color in this situation. I don't think throwing a bluegill crankbait is absolutely the deal when they're on bluegill beds. I don't really know why that is. They'll eat baits that are looking like shad. They'll eat chartreuse baits sometimes. You just kind of throw whatever you have confidence in. As far as these baits, but they have been the absolute ticket for me. I've won a lot of tournaments again on C10 and C15 and this 300 DD. So those are perfect diving depths when you're fishing those spots, you know, that are going to be in that 4 to 10 foot range. C10 is going to be that perfect 10 foot diver. It's going to be grinding that bottom, that hard bottom the entire way. And it's got this nice little compact profile, so you can't freaking go wrong with it. I love this bait. Of course, one more bait that I just flat out will not be caught dead with that when I'm fishing around bluegill baits is going to be the old glide bait. And I mean, basically it makes total sense. The bass are in there, they're feeding on bluegills, and when it's really an aggressive bite, they're really chowing down. These can be the ticket to get a bigger bite. I've caught so many, you know, 8+ pound bass that are up on bluegill beds that wouldn't eat anything else, but you throw the glide in there and they eat it. And you might want to go with something a little bit bigger, you know, like a draw or one of these clutch bosses, or this mini draw is the size of a lot of those bluegill that are in there in that 5 to 6 inch range. Has absolutely been a killer this time of year for me as well. So I'll link it down below. You know, MF10 gets it a little bit cheaper because glide baits are not freaking cheap, but throw these guys around those bluegill beds, absolutely the ticket if you want to catch the biggest fish that's in there feeding on those bluegill. So outside of bluegill beds, once again, offshore, you guys know my approach to a lot of the offshore stuff, but in case you don't know, let's go over it a little bit. Really, of course, you're gonna be looking for schools of fish, and I love to do that with side imaging. Side imaging is absolutely huge, and the first places I am going to be looking for bass in the month of June, outside of those bluegill beds, are gonna be points that come out of spawning pockets, rock piles that come out of spawning pockets, brush piles, any type of isolated brush, rock, are absolutely the deal. Bass love to get on isolated cover this time of year, and they love to get out on points where there's bait fish present. A lot of times, you know, crappie, bluegill, if you don't have shad in your lake, points become such a huge deal in the month of June for me. So really what I'm going to be doing is, you know, scanning from shallow to deep, and I like to go down the sides of a point where I'm going to be seeing water anywhere from 8 to like 20 feet deep to get started. If you have clean water in your body of water, you know, more than 5 foot visibility, then times they will get deeper than that 20 foot range. If it's really muddy, a lot of times if you have some offshore cover, they still will stick in that 2 to 8 foot range, and they can be harder to see on side imaging. But for the most part, if your body of water has 1.5, 2 foot of visibility, you know, all the way up to 5, 6 foot, that 8 to 20 foot range is gonna be really tough to beat. Sometimes when it gets really bright and the water's cleaner, they will slide out in that 20 to 30, but really that, you know, that's where I'm gonna be looking, 8 to 20 feet of water. I generally like my side imaging out about 80 feet to the sides on these little 12-inch screens that we're required to use now with the Elite Series. Any more than that, I really, you know, you're gonna have a hard time figuring out size if you're on a smaller 12-inch screen like these. You're gonna be looking for shadows and groups of fish, especially if you're starting to see really balls of bait fish out towards the main lake. Again, we're looking in spots where it's points that just into the main lake off of a spawning pocket. These fish are just going to be getting out there. If you're in a bigger body of water, it's going to take them a longer time to get from their spawning areas out to really their summer haunts. You want to be finding fish that are the first ones out there. That can be an absolute key, is finding fish that have just gotten there or just starting to set up, because those are the fish that are there for one thing, and that is feeding, and they haven't been pounded and had their heads beaten the entire time. So, you know, finding stuff that's a little bit sneakier. A lot of times a hard spot is absolutely key, which is going to show up as a little bit brighter return on your side imaging unit. And a lot of times those hard spots, you know, they can be on the side of points, they can be on the side, the high side of a channel swing where it kind of turns in and makes a curve up on the high side of that right above there. Just anywhere that the wind, the current has washed it away to the point where it's harder. I don't know what it is about hard spots. No one really does, because we're not bass, but the bass love to congregate there. Those spots can be absolutely the difference between winning a tournament and not. We just saw Tucker Smith win on Lake Fork, specifically targeting these hard bottom areas. Now, to target both fish on hard spots and in those schools offshore, again, I keep it simple, but we'll have a couple different approaches that are a little bit different. I love the Carolina rig. I love the big worm. Awesome baits for those bodies of water. I love mixing in that deeper crankbait, that 500 DD, the 400 DD, perfect for that 8 to 20 foot range. A little bit bigger profile. I love that you can sling this thing too. It's over an ounce in weight, so you can throw this thing over 120 to 150 feet. That's awesome because it gets down quick and you can cover more water that way. But some other options that I have pulled out here are really good in June as well. If you're on a group of fish and you start to see them, you know, they're bigger fish, especially those groups that are 5+ pound fish and they're in a wolf pack, this bait right here is almost impossible to beat when they start getting grouped up. The 6 cents flutter spoon, you know, any flutter spoon of that 7-8 inch size, this is my favorite, just has a different appeal than any other bait you could ever throw. I throw it down to them, I let it flutter, and you'll start to see the fish come up after it. And then it's that typical game of cat and mouse, you know, popping it, ripping it away from them. And something about how erratic this bait is right here when those fish first get out on those groups, you can definitely catch the biggest bass in that area. Now, once you've worked them over, they've gotten a little bit harder. This is probably my favorite finesse bait that you can fish at a really quicker pace. Put it on, fish with scope. You can fish it without scope. You know, this hair jig was kind of a sneak of guys like, you know, Kevin Van Dam, guys fishing offshore on some of the ledge TVA lakes for a very long period of time. And it's like one of the dumbest, most basic fishing lures of all time, but there's nothing stupid about something that works, and this guy flat out works. This is the flock hair jig. I'll link all this again down below if you guys want to check it out. But this bait's super cool because it's very, very simple to fish. Again, you can throw it a really long ways, throw it out there past the group of fish, let it hit the bottom, let some of that line get down in the water column, let it kind of bow out, burn it 3 or 4 cranks, stop it. And then you can either let some line out. If the water's deeper, you know, if you're fishing greater than 20 feet of water, I'll hit the spool, let it fall a little bit straighter down, because I feel like it's just going to pendulum kind of forever if it's at that deeper depth. And my boat's, you know, at a higher angle, so when that line goes slack, it can fall down a little bit straighter. If you don't have it go slack, it's just going to pendulum more and more. Sometimes the pendulum's the deal though, especially when you're fishing a little bit shallower, 5 to 15 feet of water. And that thing, when you stop it, it starts to kind of swing and kind of, it doesn't swim down, but these two little, this was absolutely key actually. I got some of these sent to me and I told Casey we need this hackle feather in the back. Those things kind of kick and look like a shad tail in the back. They stick out a little bit further than the bucktail that's on here. This bait will kind of swim its way down, and as it falls, it can be a huge triggering point for those fish. That's usually when you're gonna get bit. When you burn, you stop it and they see it falling and they just can't resist it. Again, we got a big chunk of metal and a little piece of fur. I don't know what it is about them, but they're very natural baits that trigger a natural instinct in those bass and cause them to eat. Now, one more bait I'd love to talk about when I'm fishing offshore, because again, it's another bait that if they aren't eating anything else, they will eat this guy right here, and that's a swim bait. And I'll fish this whale, you know, all year long. You guys were here and saw the spawn time video and the spring fishing video when I talk about how this is my favorite bait of all time, just to go cast and wind on that keel weighted hook around 5 foot or less in any type of shallow cover. This bait also becomes extremely deadly this time of year when fished on a jig head. I almost always fish on a 1/2 ounce or a 3/4 ounce jig head, depending on how deep it is. And again, that same head kick, that same hard head throb that you can't find on any other swim bait that I've ever found before, makes that jig head, even a 1/2 or a 3/4 ounce, will still wag a little bit. Great tail action. It's a cheaper bait when it comes to a swim bait this 4.5 inch size. You can bump the size up to the 6.5 if you're fishing for real magnums, you know, 6+ pounders. But this size is perfect to me. I don't really go to the smaller sizes this time of year. and I'm just winding it over the top of those fish. You know, if the group's busted up, or if they're not all dotted up on the bottom, a couple of them are up a little bit higher, fishing this bait 3, 4, 5 feet over the top of them has produced so many good fish for me. Now, that's not to say you can't crawl it on the bottom, but really when it shines over something like a crankbait or even a dragging bait on the bottom is when you're in fishing offshore stuff that's a little bit cleaner. So you're fishing not 1 or 2 foot visibility water, but you're fishing that 3, 4, 5 foot visibility water. That's when this swim bait on a keel weight, not a keel weighted, a jig head, a 1/2 or 3/4 ounce jig head is absolutely the deal. Well, that's what I got, MFers. That's my rundown for the month of June. Do me a favor, let me know your favorite bait for the month of June, and don't forget to comment, subscribe, and share this video so you can be entered to give away that awesome $100 prize pack of all those Magnum Boosa shaky worms. I want to see you guys go out and pick those up too. Let me know if you place an order. Send me a screenshot of it. I'll repost it because that's a special bait, and we've released so many really badass baits lately that we have so many I don't even have an opportunity to talk about them. I feel like we have that the big giant bodega, you know, the creature bait. We have that big crankbait that dives super deep, the jointed one. We have all sorts of great baits that come out all the time, and I don't make enough content to even tell you guys about them. So check out the new stuff we got there. We also got some really cool stuff coming as far as apparel that I can't wait to share with you as well with the new company. So I'm super excited, guys, and yeah, don't forget to enter that giveaway. I'll talk to you soon. Go catch some fish in June. Peace.